So, hello and welcome everybody to another Sacred Wisdom podcast. In this podcast today, we are going to discuss the Industrial Revolution, the World Fairs, and Tartaria. We've done a lot on this previously, so we've talked about it in the Hidden History series, but we kind of just, the more you look into the World Fairs, especially the World Fairs, it's just fascinating, and it goes very deep to how much what was involved in these World Fairs. And I believe the first World Fair was back in 1791 in Prague. And when you actually look at what happened there, that's quite incredible. But I am joined with my incredible brother again today. Welcome, Stephen. How are you?
Hi, Zach. I'm doing really well. I hope all's good with you.
Very good, my brother. Yeah. So, Steve, let's just sort of start with sort of this transition. So, in the 1700s, you kind of had this transition of the kind of old world Tartaria, this kind of where this technology was brought into another like age, and then almost like displayed at the world fairs. And then it was kind of things were kind of recalibrated and then put out into society. How do you see that time and what was going on?
Well, there's a number of events that were taking place. So if we look at different geopolitical activities, various aspects of what was occurring and arising with the emergence of the Industrial Revolution, and we know that that was a vast global event that was taking place predominantly in the Western world. And obviously the Industrial Revolution, so it's kind of given as a historical parameter to have really occurred from the 17th of February 1834, and actually progressing up to the 15th of June 1849 before it literally plateaued as an ongoing geopolitical and socio-economic process. This process, known as the Industrial Revolution, effectively took over the workforces globally that were used to being in farming, being in agriculture, the cultivating of fruits, vegetables, cereal, grains, dairy, and livestock farming, and millions upon millions of Irish people, many British people, and Western Europeans were literally taken into the large townships and the various cityscapes of their own countries, and they were repurposed, if you like, in the sense of their workplace vocation to work in factories and no longer work in the fields. So this process was about removing people from the natural settings of the open countryside in the Irish Republic, the United Kingdom of Great Britain, across Western Europe, especially in countries like France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, and so forth, and putting them into these huge factories where there was no real employment rights. There wasn't effectively any human rights therefore, as well. And leaving these individuals of all ages, as we know, there was vast amounts of child labor in the Industrial Revolution. And obviously, we've also talked about how this interconnects with the exploitation at the world fairs, where there were many, many children at the world fairs being displayed. Obviously, the incubator babies is one example of that. And so we know the Industrial Revolution was an essential elemental aspect used by the policymakers and the so-called rulers of the Western world. So what we therefore see happening is a huge transition that was in terms of collective psychology, a huge transition in the socio-economic models that had been used by the policymakers or rulers, and was preparing, Homo sapiens or human beings to embrace a completely new way of life, really a further form of enslavement on many levels, especially on the spiritual level. And so with the collapse of Tartaria, obviously we see the pinnacle of destruction that was reached during the third mud flood on the 7th of June 1892. The Industrial Revolution already had been put into motion, as I said, between the dates that I've given from 1834 to 1849, and then it was plateaued off into being an ongoing worldwide a process of socio-economic transition and
It was
removing people from
1851 was the mark of
yeah,
the Great Exhibition. That was the kind of,
there you go.
that they always say that was the start, but actually, yeah, like you say, this was going back previously, wasn't
Well,
it?
that's interesting you mentioned that date, because if you look at the Industrial Revolution, 17th of February 1834 to the 15th of June 1849, 1851 wasn't much further on from that.
Yeah.
Maybe 18 months to 24 months later, you're seeing the emergence of what you've just said. So it's very interesting when you start piecing together these timelines, you can see, Tartaria as a civilization didn't reach a stage of destruction in one event. This happened over many, many generations, over hundreds and hundreds of years. So it was a deconstruction and slow and progressive collapse of the civilization of Great Tartaria in northern Russia, as with many colonies in different countries on planet Earth, to be then repurposed, realigned, and to then to be integrated into what the policymakers or rulers wanted for the future for Homo sapiens or humans or whatever we are defined as. So this is what was going on. So
But you
the
had in
world fairs
18,
were huge indoctrination centers that were, and again, really an extension in many ways of the Industrial Revolution. But they didn't start out that way. They were there. The initial world fairs were there to show the grandeur, the majestic elegance, and beauty of Tartarian architecture. And as we've discussed many times before with the world fairs, it is very, very likely that large numbers of the buildings or edifices in the world fairs were originally there. They weren't built within 6 months, 12, 18 months, or 24 months. The logistics involved in just using horses and carriages
yeah.
with no electrical equipment at all, no, heavy duty plant equipment that's used in construction here in the modern age in the 21st century. It's impossible, and as you know, many of them didn't even have a railroad running by, station depots. They didn't have loading or unloading areas. They had no roads that were going by in many of these
Yeah.
locations,
No
and
rail
yet these
tracks. Yeah.
buildings miraculously, thousands of tons of stone apparently were put together in, say, 6, 12, 18, 24 months. And alakazam, here's another world fair. It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, this is what drew my interest into it so much, is when you start looking at the buildings and how they were built and all this amazing, incredible architecture. And it is impossible to how some of these buildings were built at that time, near
Yeah,
impossible. And there was a lot possible, I'm sure. But
yeah.
obviously, you had talking about the orphan trains in 1864.
Hmm.
So this was a period as well. So then that followed on after the Industrial Revolution of
Yeah,
1851, which was the
that's
marker.
right.
And
Yeah,
you had lots of world fairs in between that. It's like everything was invented in that period. And that's
yeah,
what I find so fascinating about it, and gives us this kind of these points of reset, which I see is kind of happening now in the time period we're in now. There is this sort of sense of a reset happening as well.
yeah,
So yeah,
that's right. Yes.
so
And the idea of these sort of world resets have been going on, for millennia. They've gone on for thousands of years. And I think what's interesting to note, it's not one single event that occurs. I think a lot of individuals in the New Age movement, they're imprinted with an idea that an event occurs and there's all change suddenly takes place. When it comes to Great Tartaria and the Industrial Revolution and the World Fairs, this was a very long, drawn out process over many, many, many years, over hundreds of years. I mean,
yeah,
the fact that when you look back to the emergence of the Industrial Revolution on the 17th of February 1834, the second mud flood had occurred on the 29th of October 1834. That the pinnacle of it, the most destructive phase. That was in the same year. So
yeah,
we know that it was almost a crossover, almost like a change of policymakers, a change of management was taking place from the old world empire to
mm,
something completely different that was emerging. And
mm,
this was preparing, humanity for this way forward, right or wrong, positive or negative. And the world fairs were these open air, socioeconomic, spiritual, cultural, and scientifically based indoctrination centers. That's what they were designed to do. It was to give the idea of how beautiful and elegant the Tartarian architecture was to start with, and this wonderful sense of spiritual beauty and focusing on really the aspects of the Christ consciousness in the old world order of Great Tartaria and Northern Russia, into then emerging into this acceptance of the Industrial Revolution and therefore the Industrial Age.
But the 1834 was the Paris Expo, wasn't there? There was
That's right.
again, and we're back to Paris because there was so many expos done around
Mm.
the Trocadero. They're all
Yeah,
in the same
France
area
was
as
a
well.
really big indoctrination location in terms of the world fairs. It's around, there's a triangulation there, as you know, with in terms of
Yeah.
sacred geometry off the River
Mm,
Seine in Paris and north central France. And so this was obviously a very unusual indoctrination location. And all heard of the subterranean passageways that exist underneath Paris and north
the
central France.
catacombs, yes.
The catacombs, that the Parisian catacombs, we know that a lot of them follow the contours of geomagnetic ley lines,
Mm,
as did many structures such as the Eiffel Tower and the Arc de Triomphe and so forth in
mm.
Paris. So there's a huge amount of connections to Western occultism and Eastern occultism in Paris, and how that interconnects with the world fairs, the Industrial Revolution, is perhaps something we can discuss on another occasion because it's such a vast and intricate subject to go into.
Well, it was energetically it was like it was imprinting a new force on that
Yeah.
on that ley line.
Yes.
What I believe that time before that these ley lines would have been used for a positive purpose. We had so many world fairs in Paris though, and so
Yeah.
much happened around that area, and
Yeah.
I'm always intrigued with that. What's your view on that in the sense why that
Well, some of the big,
area?
some I think you can, if you look at if you look at the old black and white photographs of the River Seine, you can see the Tartarian architecture. That the actual
Was
the buildings there, some of them look sort of Greco-Roman. They have Doric columns, etc. But when you actually look closely, the intricacies in the stone carvings, the fenestration, the alcatraving above the doorways is so beautiful.
mm,
And all of
unbelievable.
that existed before the emergence of the world fairs in Paris and north central France, and really were remnant buildings that displayed exclusively Tartarian architecture from the old world order of Great Tartaria that had originated out of northern Russia, the Arctic North Polar region, as we've discussed so many previous occasions. And what we then see, all of that was demolished. And now, if you go along the River Seine, obviously you've got nearby there, you've got the Eiffel Tower, but it's all
Yeah,
just basically trees and shrubs and grassland there.
yeah.
So it was a complete eradication took place to delete. Again, we see this as part of the process of the world fairs. It was showing what was in existence, and literally to the public in the minds of each individual spectator, they would see, this is the world fair. This is the Tatarian architecture from the old world order. And then it's all demolished. And so within 2 generations, all you've got left is a few black and white photographs, and maybe a couple of entries in archivist's record or a book of some nature or a manuscript, but there's virtually nothing. Nobody remembers anything.
You'd have had to have been quite wealthy to go to these world fairs. They weren't just
Yeah.
publicly open, were they, to anybody? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think there were sections that were actual private access only, but you could walk through one of a better phrase, the open space or common areas. Some of it you could just walk by, and obviously the general public could see from all the immediate roadways and access routes around the world fairs very clearly, and they were very well advertised as well at the time in the printing presses. They were very, very well advertised. The rulers and the policymakers were obviously very eager to get as many individuals as possible into the world fairs, and then really prepare them for the industrial revolution to usher them in to accepting the industrial age, and to make everyone try and forget about Great Tartaria, forget about the boundless telluric electricity they were using, their
yeah.
free energy systems. Obviously, everything we've discussed had to be either repurposed or it had to be destroyed. That's really what was taking place. But it wasn't, again, a single event that took place. This was a long-term, multi-generational process to ensure that Homo sapiens or human beings would literally just forget all about Great Tatara, and then it would just become another aspect of world folklore, an illusion, a conspiracy theory. And obviously, we've discussed at length the evidence that proves very clearly it really did exist. It was an
Certainly
authentic
did. And
old
you can
world
look
order
at
based civilization.
the marker for that obviously is the Columbian World Expo in
Yeah.
Chicago, which
Yes.
actually used to be called Shalaga. So we can
That's right.
see
Yeah.
there that was all this repurposing going on.
That was a
However, of
classic white city of
course,
Tartaria. So the
yeah,
architecture in Shalaga was known to be vast, epic, absolutely incredible, breathtaking. The intricacies in the pillars, the supporting beams, the roof lines, everything was so eloquent, so incredibly advanced. They were using advanced forms of concrete, and we've discussed all this in previous Sacred Wisdom podcasts and in
yeah,
episodes of Hidden
polymer
History.
concrete, yeah,
Yeah, it's just incredible. I mean, I am still amazed when I look at the photographs at the World's Columbian Exposition or the Chicago's World Fair
yeah,
that took place
and
between the 1st of May 1893 to the 30th of October 1893. How on earth they were able to put that together? You just
2 year
imagine that
period.
existed today. Incredible,
And
really
now
beautiful.
possibilities on that is that could there have been some people with advanced knowledge that actually did construct them buildings? That is a possibility.
It's
So,
definitely something we have to consider. But again, what we have again is no schematics. We have
mm,
no architectural diagrams. We don't have any newspaper clippings. There's not like there was not like professional photographers that were commissioned by the construction companies, or the city of Chicago authority to come in and actually say, well, we want you to film over the next, few days, the next week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, the next month, two, three, the whole progress of the construction of the World's Columbian Exposition or the Chicago World's Fair. So you can show the American people
yeah,
exactly how this was constructed. So it's clarified. There really isn't anything.
it was
So
like that. That you obviously
strange.
had the period of immigration coming into America on the East Coast.
That's right.
They came
Eastern
in and
Seaboard.
there was a
Yeah.
reconditioning, a rebuilding of society. So then people wouldn't have known.
A
Obviously,
repopulating of the former
repopulating. Yeah.
white cities of Tartaria in the United States of America and Canada
Mm,
that we were told never existed, and yet there's incredible stories or tales from Native American folklore that describe
yeah. Incredible.
these shining cities in the Appalachian Mountains, the Rocky Mountains, the Cascade Range, and yet all of this is just ignored as though
Yeah.
it's just more wild conspiracy theories. The same as when it comes to the subject of UFO studies, ultra terrestrials and
Yes. Yeah.
extraterrestrials, and their relationship with the Native Americans, that's ignored by Western science, as we've discussed so many times before. And I think this is the problem that you've got. There is such a level of collective
So
denialism
much
going on.
evidence. Yeah.
And the evidence is overwhelming, such as with the white giants of North America, the cover up by the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., and so on. And then the denial, there's been a cover up, the denial of any. So it just goes round and round and round.
I mean,
And, you know,
I just want to interject. I mean, I know people sometimes watch this and think we are talking conspiracy theories, but this is no
yeah,
theory.
yeah,
It's certainly a conspiracy to some
yeah,
level, but and obviously it's information that we've obtained in the internet over the last 10, 15 years,
yeah.
especially in the last few years, there's been a lot more information surface on this.
And it's
But
interesting to note that when it comes to
this
Great
is all
Tartaria,
documented, isn't it? That's
it's
sorry, just say
documented,
it's
and
all there.
a lot of the information is out there on blogs and forums in the Russian language. So a lot of this is in the Russian Federation. It's not being translated into the English language, and again, that's caused a number of hurdles. It means it's difficult for some individuals to go out there and do the research because it means having to go and know where to navigate to these sites that are in the Russian language, and then you'd have to cut and paste text or try and translate certain bits of it. And that in itself has been another issue. But we know that when it comes to Great Tartaria, that it's openly accepted that it did exist as a civilization,
Yeah,
and it's taken very seriously by the Russian people. It's taken seriously by the Russian government, but it's not taken seriously in the Western world. And it is the world fairs, the Industrial Revolution, and Great Tartaria are all completely interconnected. So
the maps are one indication, but the World Fairs and the Columbia Exposition is really marking that point. But
Yeah,
also
yeah,
the inventor Nikola Tesla, obviously,
yeah.
there's lots of theory about where his plans came from, and he was given them plans, channeling them plans. Aliens, even people have considered
There's all kinds
that,
of conspiracy
but
theories about where he got the schematics for all his incredible inventions. And Nikola Tesla, the Serbian genius, probably one of the greatest individuals who's ever lived. And yeah,
yeah,
was there a concealed link between his inventions and various types of gadgets and mechanisms that had been built with occult technology by the Nordic Tatarians and some of the Turkic peoples,
yeah.
in northern Russia when that civilization from the old world order had existed? Again, it's just open to speculation. We're not saying yes, that is the case, or no, it isn't the case. But he was prolific, Nikola Tesla, and an incredibly unique individual, and his life is shrouded in very strange it's open to question a lot of what went on with him behind the scenes and where he got that knowledge from. He was a unique and quite astounding person.
Well, I mean, the world wireless system that he wanted to create is all there and documented that he had the technology to do that. Obviously, there's a lot of theory that explains that this was actually quite destructive for the environment, sending these
Yeah.
signals out, electric signals, and actually could create damage. Now, that's a
Mm.
possibility, but also it was actually free energy. This was free energy systems. And, the incredible, which is kept very quiet and very in the shade, is about his a ferret car that he made that actually was
That's right.
based around,
Yeah.
actually used the atmosphere to power the car. It
Uh,
is unbelievable. I mean,
It
really, and
is.
and that's all documented.
And look at the contrast between the Industrial Revolution, where they were sending individuals down into coal mines to drill out
Yes,
thousands and thousands of tons of anthracite coal.
yeah,
We had the whole emergence of the petrochemical industry, cotton factories. We
yeah,
see everything being turned into a mass collectivized mechanistic process that was very mundane, even with steam locomotives, and all the other forms of vehicular travel at the time. And then you have Nikola Tesla. His inventions touched on the way the Nordic Tatarians and the Turkic peoples had been so proficient in absorbing the boundless telluric electricity into their electrical capacitors on the ground floors and the basements of their own buildings or edifices across the white cities of Great Tartaria. And they had, obviously, we know from many of the black and white photographs, as well as the woodcuts that have come out of blogs and forums from the Russian Federation, we know that they used very interesting metallic arrays and antennae and aerials that were literally attached to the roof lines of these various buildings, and
yeah.
therefore would absorb and then draw down the telluric electricity or the ether down into these electrical capacitors, and that were distributed from there for heating and lighting purposes, and also
I mean,
transportation.
how
So
exactly that worked, we don't know, but it
yeah,
definitely it involved another element that would more likely be some sort of mercury,
yeah,
and that was almost
type of
tapping it.
mercury vortex
Yeah,
capacitor process. Perhaps we know that there were certain types of mercury vortex power stations in
yeah,
Great Tartaria in northern Russia, as in some of their colonies around planet Earth. So there's obviously a connection between electric fields, the generation of electricity, or its. We know with mercury it can be used for calibration processes, so it's able to literally allow the transmission of electricity in a specific way. So
yeah.
there's not obviously spikes of electricity causing, malfunctions or the risk of an electrical fire in a residential, commercial, or an industrial building. But again, this is all open to speculation. We don't know the specific technical details. We're just
No,
simply
but there
putting
are people.
information out there. That's all we're
And I
doing.
mean, creating kinetic movement, natural movement,
Yeah,
and that's what it was doing. In some way, it was
that's
connecting
right.
to these electrons in the atmosphere, which is known about. This is happening, And another subject that we will go on to at some point as well is about electroculture and
Yeah.
actually how this was being used. Obviously, that wasn't. I've not looked into that in the World Fairs as such, but
No.
there were these free energy type of devices that would have been able to harness more energy, and it makes sense to help crop growth. If you could emit a frequency, a
Yeah.
wireless frequency over a field of crops, yeah, of course you could enhance that growth if it was the right frequency. That's been tested and worked out, hasn't it?
Yeah, you take yeah, exactly, and you know what comes to mind there is the Irish Druids, the British Druids, who were known to use their own version of electroculture. We know that they were involved in that. We also know, obviously, from the work of Victor Schauberger,
Of
you know,
course,
the
the
Austrian
master.
naturalist. He was an absolute genius. Yeah, an
Yeah.
incredible individual,
But
like
somebody said
Nikola
a good
Tesla.
point about Victor Scharberger and said that if he had have been a mainstream, oh, he was actually a pseudoscientist, but actually, if become a mainstream scientist, his inventions would have never happened anyway, which is a good
No.
point because they probably wouldn't,
Well,
unfortunately.
those schematics, those technical diagrams to assemble his gadgets, mechanisms, devices would have been put in a drawer, locked and kept away from public access. And he would have had to conform, he'd have taken his pay packet every month and he would have done as he was told. But that was
No,
not his incarnation here on planet Earth. And he was truly an individual that we should look at and say, wow, Victor Schauberger, like with Nikola Tesla, these individuals are truly amazing what they try to do. They literally try to liberate and set humanity free from the drudgery of the onset, if you like, of the industrial revolution and this constant mechanization of all these different processes, and that led to the vast removal of millions and millions of Homo sapiens or humans from working in farming and agriculture and being connected to Mother Nature, to the surrounding land-based and aquatic ecosystems that were actually very good for their biological health.
now,
So,
there's many reasons why this could have happened. We don't know that exactly. We can speculate on that as well, but it is certainly that we have to remember this. And anybody out there, anybody with technical ability, a workshop, look at Victor Scharberger's work, look at his plans, work that out, and actually start building it, because that's what we have to do as a community, a society on planet
yeah,
Earth now. Is have that power. It's
that's
only
right.
been wet for whatever reason has gone from us for us to remember it. And this is again what me and Stephen want to do with these podcasts and all this is help you remember and see how this is no theory. I think that we've had these deletion processes, and obviously you had World War One after
Mm,
the
yeah,
1900s, which is tragic, and then World War Two.
yeah,
These periods of time, then it just
that's
gets so
right.
reset. And people by the 50s, people were in this lifestyle that they just wanted to be happy, and there was
Yeah,
they
the
wanted to
trauma
enjoy
had been
life.
very
And
big. There was so much trauma.
yeah,
Yet even the interwar period between obviously World War One and World War Two,
yeah,
even that was fraught with geopolitical upheaval and chaos. It's like humanity was not allowed to be at peace and just rest and enjoy life. It was
no,
about creating psychic driving, fear, confusion. And this is obviously after the collapse of the old world order, the demise of the civilization of Great Tartaria, and 3, 4 generations in, then obviously the mass the mass death of millions of individuals in World War One and World War Two.
mm,
It was all the deletion had reached its final phase, really.
yeah. And then almost, and also the book burning, the information that was disappeared. And this
That's
is
right.
something we have to be aware of now with the digital age, is that information can disappear. And you only have to overlook over the last 20 years of what's been disappeared off the internet, and information that we used to look at, and
That's
you
right.
can't
Yes.
find it. It's very difficult
No.
to find these websites now and put certain bits. But we live in this time where we're here to remember it. The spires on these buildings, and just looking at the architecture of the old world, and look at
Yeah.
what's placed around us now. There was all these deletion processes that happened, and you had the Columbian Exposition, which was in 1893, but then you had the Great Chicago Fire previous to that as well. So
That's
that was
right.
the
Yeah.
building up. So there was a lot that was taken out there. I mean, Chicago was decimated as or
See,
Shilaga.
that's very interesting. The Great Chicago Fire, because that conflagration, which occurred from the 8th of October 1871 to the 10th of October 1871, was
Yeah,
reported to have occurred and been so destructive simply because there were so many wooden or timber-based buildings, residential and commercial, in the city of Chicago. But what is also known is that there were many stone buildings, massive, precisely cut blocks of stone had been assembled and put together in these huge edifices of real beauty. And these were remnant buildings that displayed Tartarian architecture. And of course, these buildings also were so severely damaged during the Great Chicago Fire. You can
yeah,
see what happened. It was all just basically put together saying, well, we'll just have to wholesale demolish everything, even those buildings that have sort of survived the Great Chicago Fire in 1871, and we'll just mass clear all of it. So it was a way of really deleting remnants of the Tartarian architecture that was seen in some of the buildings there as part of the Old World Order, under the guise of the Great Chicago Fire simply being just a devastating event that destroyed a vast amount of the city of Chicago itself. But we know, obviously, from what we've discussed, that Chicago was originally known as Shalaga, and
yeah.
its entire aerial plan, if you like, of the way it had been designed was radically different. The shape of that cityscape was very, very different
Mm.
than the way it was then developed by the individuals that took over, that during the collapse of the old world order. So
But these fires happen all over the world, going back
that's
to,
right.
the Great London Fire, all that.
They can be, I mean, you could really define the great fires as the great purges,
Yes,
because it wasn't that they were just the great fires, with a capital G, capital F. They were really designed to delete, that specifically were designed and purposely created to delete and conceal the past, to actually try and make as many Homo sapiens or human beings forget that great Tartaria northern Russia and all its colonies around planet Earth had been part of this old world order during a golden age, where there had been this boundless telluric electricity that was used for heating, lighting, transportation, electroculture or electroponic plant growth to obviously maximize both the yield and the size of fruits, vegetables, and cereal grains. And yet none of this could be really allowed to continue, because the mindset that the policymakers really wanted was one where individuals were dumbed down, accepted their servitude, complied with the Industrial Revolution, and learned to live in a third party debt usury mechanistic system where they had complete control and there wasn't any conflict of interest, because the civilization of Great Tartaria was gone.
and sadly, we're bringing it up to this day and age. Look at where we've got to now with all that history, and these events have happened. This
That's
isn't,
right.
again, they're real events. They're not, they're all documented. And obviously there's a perspective of them, how they're viewed, obviously because they're written by policymakers. Look, when you actually look into it and the information around it, you start realizing
That's
what
right.
was
Yeah,
going on, and
absolutely.
actually there were these deletion processes. I mean,
Yeah.
the Great Fire of London as well, all this stuff, you realize it's absolutely terrible what's happened to humanity.
Yeah.
And obviously we've been reset and constant basis, and we've brought to this point where you only have to look around in America now, and all over the world, and you can see how many problems we're having,
Oh,
and
it's
what
horrendous. Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
very messy, and it's sad
Yes,
that
yes.
we and what do we do about this? So Steve, what do you feel now? Like, let's bring it up some positive action for people, because this has happened,
Yes.
and we want
I,
to we want to
yeah.
move forward with strength and positivity. That's the way to go forward, not
Yeah, I'm
be
not somebody
angry.
that is
you know
puts, I don't have a fake hope for the future. I don't have fake optimism. I actually just believe that in terms of frequency, vibration, and energetic resonance, what is going on a much wider scale in the center of the Milky Way galaxy, with these huge increasing exponential surges in cosmic radiation that we know that are entering the solar system. They affect the magnetic fields, the gravitation of the all the different planetary bodies within this solar system. We know that it affects the magnetic field and the heliopause, the heliosphere of our sun, which is a yellow dwarf star. It's not even obviously a very big stellar mass, but that in turn then affects the magnetic field around planet Earth and the jet streams, the weather conditions, and so forth. But what is known is when this starts to take place, and you get these increasing surges in cosmic radiation that create all these different effects, it does start to affect actually human behavior. So we know there's been many studies done going back even to the antediluvian period before the first great flood, the second great flood, going back to the upper Paleolithic,
And
where
how
you
does it
see
affect human behavior?
it,
How is it?
it improves the development of new civilizations.
Nice.
So
Okay.
yeah, so this helps with it's like a reconstruction process. And this is what I've said that I do believe by 2034, 2035. So roughly 10, maybe 11 years from now, we're going to look at the emergence of a new golden age or this new golden period. We're coming out of all this darkness and this ignorance and this mechanistic thinking. This duration of ignorance that's gone on for the last 150, 200 years with the collapse of Great Tartaria, with the emergence of the Industrial Revolution and all the social indoctrination that was going on during the world fairs and all the different deletions and so forth that we've just discussed. So this is reaching a phase of intensity that's very, very frenetic.
Yes.
And this occurs just before its dissipation and the emergence of this golden age or this golden period. And I would like to add in 2034 to 2035, doesn't mean it's suddenly going to appear. It's the
No, it'll be
emergence of it. It's an ongoing process that will go on for many, maybe 15, 20, 25, 30 years after 2034, 2035. But it means it's a restitution, it's a recovery, time duration for Homo sapiens or human beings. It's the emergence of spiritual psychology. The actual mass production will begin of free energy systems, the advanced use of 3D bioprinting machines
yeah.
to actually really just help ordinary men and women, human beings, actually get on with their lives and and create an embetterment for themselves so they can really spiritually and psychologically and emotionally develop and remove a lot of the stress, trauma, angst, frustration that so many individuals are currently experiencing and is becoming more intense.
Yeah, I feel that's a very nice way of looking at it. I think there will be there the information and technology we do have, it's not going to be like completely reset. We're going to have
No,
this reintegration in a much more
it's a
brighter way.
transition and a morphing process.
But of
And a lot of what we have now is actually very good, is reusable. And itself,
course,
as what happened with Great Tartaria, with its occult technology, we can repurpose and adapt
yes.
much of the gadgets, the mechanisms, including computers and everything else. And it's going to be absolutely fine. There's always been upheaval with humanity for thousands of years. It's just because
Tends
of
to
the
be the way
internet,
we
the
work on this
digital
planet, isn't it?
age, you know.
It's the way it works, it seems to be this conflict resolution.
Yeah,
But obviously, when we look back in hindsight and we see that, it's very sad. You've got to remember that when people were going through that in the industrial age, the way we see it is sad, but the way they experienced it is very different to the
especially
way,
for those factory children,
of
bless
course.
them. I mean, it was complete exploitation. It was horrific. It was awful, highly traumatic. And the workhouses they were put in, you see that with obviously the novels of Charles Dickens, like Oliver Twist, for example.
Of course, yeah.
So you can see it was such a time in the Victorian age, here in the United Kingdom of Great Britain, as with parts of Western Europe and North America, it was awful. There was no employment rights, there was no human rights, and there wasn't even the use of personal protective equipment, or PPE as it's now called. There wasn't any health and safety regulations or guidelines. And actually, in many of these factories and workhouses in the Industrial Revolution, obviously that led to the industrial age, vast numbers of the children were barefoot. They had no
No.
shoes or work boots. They had no protection, and I find that really, really awful, really
Yeah.
awful.
But
And there was no
again, at the
empathy or
time they
compassion for them.
lived through that, it would have been very different for them. We can only look back on that and give compassion,
Yeah,
and obviously what they lived through was part, as tragic as it is. Please, everybody understand that it is. I do believe it's awful, but it's a
yeah,
soul experience which we've gone back to many, many times, and it's what we've had to live through on this planet, and that's soul learning, I suppose, to get to where we are now and
yeah,
get
yeah.
this part of the development of
Some
humanity in the
some
bizarre way it is.
some soul personalities require many incarnations to have different experiential understanding and discernment that can then lead to another incarnation where it all comes together.
Mm.
So again, to go into this is so
It's a
profound because
massive
it's
it's a
so
whole
far
other
beyond
talk.
space time. We're really touching on the divine consciousness of the universal creator.
Yeah.
And nobody can really fully comprehend the Lord God Almighty. And even trying, for many people, trying to comprehend Christ consciousness is a very difficult thing for them to do. It is so overwhelming for many people. But yeah, it's so complex. The whole incarnation, reincarnation, the various aspects of learning of each soul personality. And when we're talking about trillions upon trillions upon, quadrillions upon quadrillions of soul personalities,
Yeah.
not just, coming and going from planet Earth and this solar
Other
system.
galaxies. And
Yeah, I mean, you've got what, 4.5 trillion at least galaxies in this physical universe, the divine
yeah.
cosmos. It's
Yeah.
it's beyond measure, beyond
And
comprehension.
it
It's
is sad
incredible.
that we've kind of, I mean, so many people believe, obviously, science has kept us restricted in that them boundaries, but also as well to break out of that as well, to break into, a new way of thinking, have epiphany moments. So we kind of like, wow, this is amazing. I mean, we go back to our childhood and we're playing on little analog computer games and stuff like this, and Spectrum football. That was amazing. That was
Oh,
incredible.
it's
But if
like, yeah,
we didn't
the
know
old
about
days. We
Tartaria. We didn't know about the old world
No,
then,
you
and
had the
that
Z.
was
You
still
had.
incredible.
I know we were amazed when the ZX80 came out. Then it was the ZX81. Then it was
Yeah,
the Spectrum 48K. Then it
yeah,
was the Spectrum 128K. Then it was the
yeah,
128K plus data recorder.
yeah,
And that, obviously you had the Amiga and all the others that came out as well. And obviously we were obsessed with the coin op
yeah.
arcade
Arcades
machines.
and yeah,
Yeah, we all embraced the early stages of the digital age with computer software, and it was amazing. They were magical, brilliant days of entrepreneurship, of creativity that was just really quite unique.
yeah,
I feel now everything's become so mass conformist,
yeah.
so rigidly focused, so unified in a very mundane and quite a miserable way, that
Mm.
this is really kind of the winding down of this whole temporal duration of darkness and ignorance and egocentric thinking, really preparing the way for this new golden age or golden period that starts around 2034 to 2035. I think I'm feel very optimistic, but not fakely optimistic. I just
No,
feel that's what's going to happen on a psychic level, if you like, or a clairvoyant level, or in terms of using extrasensory perception or ESP. I just know that that's what's going to happen in the next 10 or 11 years. So,
and I know there's a lot of negativity around self development, but and the law of attraction. I know there's a whole hokey pokey kind of concepts around that, but these things we magnetize, so we need to stay in a bright vibration as possible we can, so when we look at information like this, it is the past, and it's to understand and learn from it, not to get angry and reared up about it, and which so many do. They get quite annoyed and sort of they create an opposition, and they create these players where they're actually battling this you know force where they can't really do anything about it, and it's all actually an eternal sort of process where they're actually damaging themselves more. And I think this is important that we, especially looking at alternative media and information, and like I spoke about in other videos about how the vibration of what we are, but we are magnetizing this reality to some level. So that's important, that we're drawing and attracting these experiences to ourselves, and we should question that. That's the question we should ask and really understand about this, and this vast,
Yeah.
incredible world that we're in, right? Because although it's
Well, one of the greatest things about planet Earth is it does have a lot of ecological diversity, and
yeah,
Mother Nature, or the Earth Mother, when she becomes very fertile again, during the springtime going towards summer, and you look at all the different trees and the shrubs and the flowering plants, the non-flowering plants, there's the bird songs, and everything suddenly there's this incredible energetic resonance that builds up through in the biosphere of Mother Nature. That is really a gift that we should appreciate, and it really helps to ground us. It's very good for the mental health of Homo sapiens, or human beings, to regularly get out into Mother Nature, into the natural surroundings. It's very important. So I'd say that's something we should appreciate, absolutely. And I think that's also going to be integral, Mother Nature, that is, and the ecosystems, and how we live in tandem with newly emerging kinds of occult technology during the golden age or golden period that begins around 2034, 2035. And I think it's going to be fantastic. It will take quite a while to get there. There's a lot of work to be done, and a lot of changes coming. And in the next 10 or 11 years, there will be a lot of upheaval, a lot of chaotic, sort of unusual events taking place
yeah.
around planet Earth. But that's always been the case to a lesser or more intense extent for thousands of years. It's just we're in the digital age. We have access to the internet.
Everything's there. Yeah.
Everything's immediately there in terms of news and current affairs. That's all it really is.
Yes, it is, Steve. Well, look, thank you, my
Yeah.
brother. It's been amazing. And just to say, we have got our new book out, Illuminous Worlds, as an ebook and also as a paperback as well, which is a very nice book there. There's a lot of information, a lot of research put into this. So check that out. Thank you, Stephen. It's been amazing as always, and really nice to
You're
share time
welcome,
with you.
Zach. It's been a very productive Sacred Wisdom podcast. I'm very happy that we've covered this information. I think, we've got quite a bit more to talk on various other subjects to do with Tartaria in the future as well, which I'm looking forward to helping to present. That'd be great.
Brilliant, Steve. Well, look, everybody, thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't. You can join the members section also, and there's lots more content in there. But for now, it's a bye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.